In this video, I'm going to talk about a few important tips on how to create an epic cinematic video. Stay tuned. What is happening, everybody? It is your boy Sean Alami, and I hope wherever you are, you're staying safe and creative. I'm gonna go over a few important tips that if you apply them next time you're creating a video, I will promise you, it will take your final work into a whole new level. I'm talking about creating something that will instantly give your audience goosebumps. I mean, that is why we are in the content creating business, right? To give goosebumps to our audience. In another word, they call us goosebumpers. I don't know if that's even a word, but you get the point. So that brings us to my number one tip, which is the most important tip that I can give you. Shoot in slow motion. When you shoot in slow motion, 60 frames per second, 120 frames per second, right off the bat, it will give your work a cinematic and a dramatic look. I'm going to show you an example. I shot the same scene in normal speed and in slow motion, and I'm going to show you the difference. First, let's look at the one in normal speed. Not so interesting, is it? Now, let's look at the same thing in slow motion. I'm sure you noticed the difference. So my friends, shoot in slow motion. I will promise you, it will make your clips a lot more dramatic and cinematic. Now that brings us to my second tip, is to always have an establishing shot. Now what is actually an establishing shot? In my opinion, I think it's supposed to set the mood, the location, time of the day, and it is really the first page of the story that you're gonna tell. There's a couple of ways to go about it. In most cases, you see people opening up with a drone shot or a wide shot of the scene, establishing the location. Or in my video, I started with a close-up, kind of an abstract shot of my talent, and after a few shots, I reveal what she actually looks like. My next tip is to throw a couple of seamless transitions in there. Why? Because in my opinion, it adds a cherry on top. Now, some of you, when you hear that phrase, you might think twice, because in the past couple of years, this technique has been overused to a point where a lot of creators are trying to avoid it as much as they can. But I still believe if it's done right, and if it's done in a proper way and a creative way, you can still achieve that cherry on top. In my case, I always try my best to be original and try not to copy what somebody else is doing. So I went ahead and spent the time and learned FPV specifically for cinematic purposes. And I'm at a stage where I'm trying to create nice transitions from my FPV drones to my Sony camera. It just gives a nice effect, which is very welcoming, especially if you use it at the beginning of your video. And this way, I also avoid using those pre-made presets for seamless transitions in Premiere. The next tip I'm going to give you is not so much of a technical tip. I recommend to always have a small storyline. I mean, even if your clip is 30 seconds, even up to a minute, have your talent follow something or do an action rather than just showing, a pretty scenery or beautiful shots. I mean, sure, that's cinematic. I'm not saying that won't be enough to create a cinematic video, but when you do add a storyline and action, when your talent is walking up to a location to do something at the end of the video, it focuses the attention of the audience onto something. And when you are telling a story, you are following along the cinematic lines. The next tip is to have a variety of different types of shots. A wide one, a medium one, and a close-up one. Now these could be static shots on a tripod, or you could use a gimbal. But once you have these different types of varieties, you can mix and match really nicely in the edit room. Now let's talk some camera settings. Number one is to shoot at a wide aperture. Anything that your lens can handle, anywhere from an f1.2, 2.8, 3.5. This will make all the focus on your talent or on your subject, and it will make everything in the background a little bit more blurry. It gives it that bouquet effect. But of course, when you do that on broad daylight, you're letting in a lot of light into your camera, and that is why we use an ND filter. Bump the camera back down a few stops to get the right exposure. And last but not least, always set your shutter speed double the number of your frames per second. In my case, I was shooting 50 frames per second, so it was 100 for me. Now you've wrapped up your shoot, you're in front of your computer, and you're thinking, how am I going to be able to present this work to its best potential? Now the next tip I'm going to give you might just be the most important tip that I've talked about today, and that is finding the right music. I literally just spent the full day listening to different types of music, and I would pick my favorites, add them to a playlist, and then I would later go narrow them down to 1 or 2 songs, and I would play back on my timeline, and I made sure that I'm cutting to the music. This way it makes it even more dynamic. So if you apply some of these tips that I talk about today, I will promise you your videos will look more cinematic. Well, thank you guys for sticking around. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, leave a comment. Let's have a conversation and become friends. Until we see each other next time, ciao.